Today's Sober Friends podcast is brought to you by Rachel, who bought us 3 coffees at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. It's important for Rachel to keep the show on the air, to get this into the new guy or gal's ear. And if you find value in this show, please be like Rachel. Consider giving a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends podcast. When you first come into recovery, Steve, you got to ask for help. And the reason that it's important to ask for help is if you could do this by yourself, you would have found a way to put the bottle down. I couldn't do it unless I let somebody else help me. What's your thoughts on asking for help and achieving sobriety?
Hey, Matt. Yeah, it's always good to be with you. And before we get into the meat and potatoes of this podcast, I just want to say we're recording this on an anniversary of yours, and I just want to say congratulations.
Oh,
and,
thank you.
Give you a shout out.
9 years.
9 years today. You won't hear it. When you hear it, it'll be a week later. But 9 years today, or sometime later.
I hope I'm still sober when you hear this.
Yeah, I hope you're still sober too. But yeah, I remember.
I want to pause for a second because a lot of people use their sobriety date as the day after. I didn't know enough, and I picked the sober day of this is the anniversary of the day I last took a drink. It was when my now 9-year-old came home from the hospital. My father-in-law brought over a bottle of white wine, and I drank 3/4 of it myself, and I saw that I was about to down that bottle, and I stopped. And that's the last drink I ever had, and it wasn't planned.
Interesting. Yeah, and it is different, right? Some people, my sobriety date is the first day sober, right? And I don't think it matters. I mean, people do it both ways, so I honestly don't think it matters. It's just a date. It's a date that we mark. Some people find it very valuable, very important. I care less about it than probably most people. I truly, we talk about it before, I truly believe that my sobriety is really a day-by-day thing, and it really depends on how I'm doing for today. And I always say, if you want to check out how my sobriety is, just ask my wife. Really, just ask her how I'm behaving, and she'll tell you what my sobriety is like.
My buddy Jill Teets from the Sober Powered podcast asked me, it's your anniversary. What are you doing? Are you taking the day off? Are you doing something special? I'm like, no, I'm not drinking.
Right.
And my wife asked a little bit about that. I'm not supposed to drink. I'm not going. It's just my view. It's nice to mark. I like to share it for the purpose of other people can see that it's possible. If I can get 9 years,
I agree.
You can get through the day. I'm not supposed to drink. It's not safe for me. So I'm one of these, yay, I did what I was supposed to do anyways. Right. So after a while, that the anniversaries in the first year every month, big deal. Up to a first year. After that, it's kind of like I'm going to stop counting.
And again, we're off sort of topic, but again, it's a good discussion. Yep. I think some of them are fun. I think a 5-year or 10-year, right? When you start hitting some of those bigger ones, I think when you hit to some of those 20 years, like, some people have some great, we gave out John had 25 years last night?
Yeah. I knew it was around that period of time. Yeah. I had no idea. So Tim, who was a guest on our show, had 17 years.
Right.
And when I first met him, he was at about 10. Right. Or so, like 9 or 10, if I'm doing.
Well, if you have 9, he had 17. If he had 17, right? Then that means he had 8 years, right? He had 8 years when you met him, or maybe 9 when you met him. Yeah.
He's stuck at 8 or 9 years in my mind.
Right.
And then I hear 17. I'm like, what the hell happened?
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I guess it's true.
Yeah, I met Timmy just a few years ago. When I say a few, probably now 5 or 6. Where I really got to know him. He would go to meetings, but I didn't know who he was that well. But anyway, congratulations again, and we'll get to the topic. But asking for help, I've talked about this often. I talk about it a lot. Matter of fact, I'm speaking this week for the first time in a long time. I can't remember the last time I spoke. And I'm speaking at a 7 o'clock in the morning meeting. Now, I don't wake up. I used to wake up early. Man, it's gonna be a different day for me. This Thursday I'm speaking. But anyway, I've talked about a lot of times that when I came in here, I knew I needed help, but man, I did not want to ask for help. I really took me some time to figure out how to do that, how to ask for help. And then the biggest thing for me, how to trust somebody to help me, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like really, right? Really what it comes down to is lots of people are willing to help you, take you, meet with you, have coffee, maybe read the book with you. But then in our program, in this 12-step program of AA, we come to these steps of the 4th step, right, where we have to work on our character defects, and then our 5th step where we have to share those with another alcoholic or another person. It doesn't have to be an alcoholic, but another person. And that's typically, in our program, your sponsor. And that can be tricky at times. That can be tricky for some of us, right, depending on what's in your past. I know it was tricky for me. I know there are things, and you know, people say it, and it's somewhat a cliche, but there were things that I had in my past that I thought I would never see the light of day. So that's, you know, you really got to trust somebody, right? Because usually this is somebody within your community, within your AA community, and you got to trust that whatever you tell them, it's going to stay with them. That they're not going to just say, hey, I was talking to her, oh, you know, Steve's got some other problems going on, or, you know, whatever it is. You got to just trust that they're going to be faithful to that, you know, to keeping that between the two of you.
I think that's down the road from where a newcomer might even be well past where they're capable. Yeah, the idea, our sickness is we can't ask for help for anything. It's a sign of weakness. So even letting somebody know I have a drinking problem is problematic. That causes embarrassment. I'm a loser. I'm a failure. I have poor character. And if I didn't have poor character, I would be able to figure this alcohol thing out. So let alone walking in for the first time to a meeting and seeing a bunch of strange dudes. Because I like a lot of the strange dudes in there, but the first time you walk in, you see types of faces that you wouldn't normally hang out with. And some people to you might look weird. And I'm going to ask that weirdo with a long beard and an earring and a hat and a rumpled up shirt for help. You don't look like me. I should be helping you. There's a lot of that pride, I think, at first. You got to break down.
I don't think there's any question that you have to overcome some of our own prejudices as we walk in, whatever they might be, right? Whatever they might be. They may be us, you know, people like you and me, maybe looking at somebody with the rumpled shirts and the long beard and maybe, you know, a little disheveled saying, oh, you know, how is that person going to help me? Or there may be that person looking up at us saying, oh, look at this guy. He's got everything. He really didn't lose anything, right? How is that person going to identify with me? I've been living in the streets for the last 5 years. But the truth is, as we know, for the most part, none of that matters, right? Because when you get down to it, we're there to talk about our alcoholism. And I don't care where you live. I don't care what your economic situation is. I don't care if you've been to prison, you haven't been to prison. A lot of those things. I was never homeless. I've never been to jail. I've never been to prison. But I will tell you, I know a lot of guys who have been all of those things, sometimes all of them. And when I talk to them about their drinking, I can identify with their drinking. I can identify with the fact that they needed to take a drink, you know, at certain times. So that's all I have to identify with. I don't have to identify with the economic, with the education. Listen, our meetings go from everywhere from people who are living in the streets to people with PhDs, professors at major colleges. So, you know, it covers the gamut.
When you get into it, you start to see that the only commonality is the only one you need. And then you start having bonds with people who are very different than you. But up front, I think that's probably the biggest barrier is, and this might be step 1 and step 2 time, of the fact that you've got to ask somebody else, and likely it's going to end up being a total stranger.
A lot of times it will be. And we've had some new guys come around recently, and there was a guy who came to our Friday night meeting a few weeks ago. And I talked to him afterwards, and I said to him, like, listen, here's what you need to do. And he said, it was like, oh, you know, he said in the meeting, oh, I need some help. So after the meeting, I'm like, you gotta hang out. You gotta do something. You gotta find somebody to help. He's like, will you help me? I'm like, of course I'll help you. I said, I'm not applying for the job. You know, I'm like, that's not what I'm telling you. I'm just telling you this is what you got to do. Go to a couple meetings, listen to what people say. And he was a younger guy. He wasn't that young, but he was probably in his early 30s. And he ended up hooking up with a guy who's younger. And I, you know, found that out. I'm like, good, because, you know, but that's what you could do. Like, and this guy, he didn't know this guy he asked for his help. He met him at this Friday night meeting. He knew him for 2 weeks, and he saw him for an hour and 15 minutes twice. That's how much he knew this guy. And they did get together. They went to more meetings. So you typically are going to ask for somebody for help that you don't know. I tell the story, and I'll just go back to my story a little bit. And it happened like I walked into my first AA meeting. I had gone there for a few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks maybe. When I first started, I was still drinking a little bit. But the time where I really started to get a little bit of help with the program, the guy who was chairing the meeting saw me standing around, put out his hand and say, "Hey, I'm Mike. How you doing?" Right? And I tell the story, and he invited me to just take a quick run down to the grocery store with him that night. And I tell this a lot of times because it's a funny story, and I'm like, I just met this guy like 2 minutes later, and now I'm going to get in the car with him and go to the grocery store because he needed to pick up milk, But I was so desperate that I said, sure. And I got in his car and we went and we picked up and he became my sponsor, But that is the type of thing that you need to do. Like, you need to trust somebody. You need to ask for help. He was happy. He was only about 3 years sober at the time, which is sort of like a nice time to start helping somebody, right? 3 years sober, you've got some.
I can't even think of Mike being like a new guy.
Not the Mike that we go from. Yeah, not the different Mike, right?
No, I know who you're talking.
Yeah.
I know who your sponsor is.
Okay, yeah.
I just think of him as a grizzled old timer forever.
Yeah, I agree. Nowadays, yeah.
Yeah.
This was back in '95, but so he is, right? Right. So
things change, but I'm just like, right, wow, Mike was a new guy once.
So Mike's coming up on, right? So Mike's coming up. He might have 30 years now. Yeah, he might have 30 years.
So I think, because I haven't seen Mike in a number of years.
Yeah, right. Me neither.
But I talked to him when I was newly sober. And I think this is one of the things that we, as people with alcoholics with some level of good sobriety and time, can help that person grease the skids a bit so they can ask for help, and that's be approachable. That's the thing I remember from Mike is he was incredibly approachable.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's easy to ask him for help.
I remember when you came in. I do. You're one of the guys I remember because when you came in, right, so you got 9 years and I'm going on 13. So I had about 3 or 4. I was going on 4 years, right? And I do think that's like the sweet spot of when maybe you feel like you're ready to sponsor somebody. And I remember you coming in sort of trying to figure that out. And I remember talking to you at the Friday night meeting one time.
Yeah.
And you were trying to figure it out. And thinking, oh, well, and I was thinking like, oh, wonder if Matt's going to ask me to be a sponsor.
Yep.
But, and I just remember you trying to, and I remember you talking to people, it's like trying to get like, how does this work? Asking me like, how does this work? I don't know how this works. Because none of us knew how it worked until we got in there and we asked for some help.
I just remember that I was treating it like a business, that there was this whole formal process, right, which is the level of my psychosis at the time, but probably not much different than other people. It's you're in here and, well, I think my mindset was I want to do this well. So there was not going to be a failure here because I had the mindset of I just need to figure this out. And I had my own issues of asking for help because, well, I think this goes into the next topic around this is the fear of rejection. What if I ask for help and the person says no? What if I get a brush off? Because that is absolutely devastating to me in this vulnerable situation.
Absolutely. I mean, I thought about that too. What if they say no? Oh my goodness. How embarrassing will that be? Am I so far gone that somebody doesn't even want to help me? Right? Like you do. You have that fear of rejection. And trust me, fear of rejection is a whole nother, it's an issue. It's one of the things I had to deal with from growing up in an alcoholic family, with an alcoholic mother. I was always paranoid of being rejected and not being cared for. Yeah, it's a scary feeling. And that's why it's important. That's why I like to go up to a newcomer and talk to them without lobbying for any type of a job, right? We've talked about this before. I am not somebody who puts up my hand. When they say, is anybody willing to sponsor? I never raise my hand because I don't think that's how you pick sponsors. I was taught that when you go to a meeting, you listen to what people share, right? And that you find somebody that sounds good to you, right, and you ask them. Like, that's the best way. Now, if you're coming in there and your ass is on fire and you need just some help tonight, then you just ask somebody, like, hey, I need help. And typically, especially in the meetings that we go to, the men's meeting and stuff, if you raise your hand and say, I need help, you're going to have a bunch of guys who are going to come over and talk to you at the end of the meeting and give you the help you need. But they're going to ask you to do some stuff. They're not going to say, oh, sure, here, I'm going to take care of you. They're going to go, no, let's go to this meeting tomorrow night, right? Do it all the time. I'll pick you up, but let's go to this meeting tomorrow night.
Because that's what real help looks like.
Right.
It's not taking care of you. It's, I'm going to guide you to the way I got sober.
Yep.
And that means I'm going to pick you up to a meeting tomorrow. How's that helpful? You're going to meet some more people and you're going to see some good sobriety.
So a real life example of this is a guy I know. I've known him for a long time. Had many 24 hours, and recently relapsed. Okay, many more years than me. And I talked to him, and he was at a meeting with me, and he's like, hey, I'm going to do a 90-90. And if for those who are not familiar with the AA program, that means you are going to do 90 meetings in 90 days. Typically that's a meeting a day, but some people will do 2 meetings and they count it, right? So it all depends on how. That's a little bit like sobriety dates. You get to pick it when your sobriety date is. If you want to do 2 meetings in a day, count it as 2 and 90-90, that's fine. But I started saying, well, here's the meetings I go to, right? And he has started to come to our Monday night meeting. And I told him, I'll pick you up, right? I'll pick you up. He doesn't live far from me. And he always says to me, hey, if you don't mind, I'll drive. I'm like, yeah, that's fine, but I don't mind. I'll pick you up. I already pick up another guy. I'll pick you up and we'll go to the meeting. That is helping out. That's number one. That's helping somebody. And that's for him accepting help. Right? He's accepting help even for somebody who has more sobriety than me, is accepting help to make sure that he gets hit through his 90-90, And it's funny because we were driving to the meeting last night and he asked me a question. He was going through his sponsor, and it happened to do with this 90-90. And he's going on a retreat this weekend. And he says, hey, I'm going on a retreat. It's a 12-step. It's a lot of work. We go through all the steps. He goes, how should I count that in my 90-90? And I said, oh, he goes, because I think it's like 6 meetings because we go through all these different things. And so we talked about it. I said, listen, if it was me, I would count it as at least a meeting a day, right? You're doing a retreat every day. You're doing some type of meetings. His sponsor thought it should only be counted because there's only one official AA meeting in that group. He should only count it as one meeting. So, but my point to that whole thing is he was asking for help of how to solve that. Right. Like, what do you think? How do you think I should handle that? And he just wanted he's like, I may not do what you tell me, but I just want to hear what you say,
Most I can think of is that's awfully literal. That's what I'd be thinking.
Yeah.
If you're at a retreat, that's much more than one. To me.
I agree.
You're getting a big dose of recovery.
Yes. Listen, if somebody asks me how many meetings I do, I count this as a AA meeting. I do. We've always said that.
Yeah, I do too.
And it's like, I do something, right now I do something 4 nights a week, right? I go to Monday, Friday meeting, I do this, and then we do Joe and Charlie tomorrow night. And then I'm a GSR, sometimes I do that, sometimes I'm doing something 5 nights a week. So, and that to me is like, if I was counting 90-90, I'd be counting all those things because those to me are AA approved things to do. So, so anyways, it's a couple of things, that we've talked about is, like you said, asking for help, trust, fear of rejection, all of those things come into play on this. And I think that's why you really got to come in and you just got to stick around. You got to take your time. You got to, listen to other people and then, feel your way through it. I really do.
How often do you think you have to ask for help after that initial time?
Well, listen, I ask for help on a regular basis. I really do. And a lot of it's small stuff. But listen, when I pick up the phone because I'm having a bad day, I'm asking for help, right? I'm asking somebody to talk to me because I'm having a bad day, if I'm stressed out over something. So anytime like that, I'm asking for help.
This is where John would come in if he was here. And he would talk about that big 10,000-pound phone with the big giant buttons, and that being so hard, asking for help of dialing the numbers.
Yeah.
Mike was talking about this the other night, that am I doing the wrong thing? That he had been calling somebody to help them repeatedly. And then the guy finally said, "Don't ever call me again."
Right.
And Mike asked me, "Have I done something wrong?" And I said, "No, Mike, you've done nothing wrong. You had the number of another alcoholic. In your heart, you were looking to help them. Your side of the street is clean. If they're going to now piss all over you, that's on them. But you stayed sober. You did the right thing."
Absolutely. You did the right thing as long as you're not lashing out at that person. No.
I don't think Mike's capable of that.
No, he isn't. But you're absolutely right. And that phone is tough for many people. I get it. I've come to the realization that there's a whole bunch of people out there who are more comfortable texting as a form of communication than they are talking. And I'm okay with that with certain people, like it's just easier. Now, and again, most of those people I'll talk to once in a while anyway, like we'll do text most things, but there's always a phone call somewhere down the line or I see them. If I see them on a regular meeting, or see them at multiple meetings, then texting is fine in between those meetings, right? If there's something to talk about when we get to a meeting, then I usually have a few minutes to talk to them and bring up like, hey, what's going on with this thing or whatever. But that phone can be that one-on-one. You said it. You said one of the new guys just called you. Wasn't that? Oh, yeah. We talked about this the other week. We had a new guy come to the Monday night, and you said that this person had called you, and it was an awkward phone call, right? Yeah. It's like, what do I talk about? And it's like, that's okay. That's okay to have an awkward phone call, The important thing is, the important thing is calling. Yeah. How can you not have an awkward phone call until you get to know somebody? Like you and I can talk. We can pick up the phone, and there's a slew of topics we can talk about. Whether it's just a cordial conversation or something that's there's a problem going on.
That's the thing that is worth mentioning if you're brand new, when you're asking for help. If one of your issues in asking for help is how you ask, and it being awkward, and it feel like a bumblebee landed on my tongue, stung it, and now it's swollen, get that out of your mind. If you've got to ask for help and it is really uncomfortable and you can't get the words out and you don't know what to say, then you go with it. Because if you're talking to somebody with any quality of sobriety, they're just going to sit and listen and say, it's okay, I've been there too. Because we all have had those moments. It's hard to do.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. It's a practice, right? It's a practice. Our program is a practice. We practice these steps. And, I always love the whole thing about meditation, right? Meditation is a practice, right? You don't perform meditation, you practice. It's a practice. You keep doing it over and over and over again. And so we have to do that with our program too. We have to practice these steps. We have to practice the things. When I came in, I couldn't figure out how, we talk about like when I did my 4th step and my 5th step, and I sort of identified my character defects. One of them, we've talked about it. One of the big ones was fear. And I was able to do that, and then I was able to do a 6 and a 7 and ask my higher power to remove that character defect. It didn't go away. That character defect didn't go poof. And it started as a very slow process that nothing changed. For me, nothing changed right away. And then it changed slowly like, oh, wait a minute. I'm fearful of this situation. Like, I feel fear. Why do I feel fear in this situation? And that was just it. I still couldn't do anything. I still reacted poorly about it. And then slowly I was like, okay, I'm feeling this fear, but it's misplaced fear. I shouldn't be reacting to it. And I was able to slowly now today, after years of identifying it and then putting some tools in place to work with it, I don't need to feel that way or act out as often. I still can on occasion, but as often as I did in the past.
I have a thought that came in. A lot of this is brought up because of people who I talk to. During the day, during the week, people will talk to me and I'm like, ooh, that's a topic we could talk about. And this person I was talking to said, they talk to me, so they must trust me, which is quite an honor, but said, I generally don't trust people and I generally don't really like people. And so I find most people to be annoying. And I was thinking that through, and it just hit me because for me, lack of trust or not wanting to like other people was really self-defensive. It's, I don't want to do that because I already know you're not going to like me. Right. And so I'm defending myself against the pain. And I'm going to ask this person, And maybe they didn't ever thought of it, but it feels like when you feel that way, I don't trust and I don't like people, it's because you're not going to like me. And this saves me from getting hurt.
Yeah, again.
And it's really self-defeating.
It is self-defeating, but it seems like when you're doing it, it seems like self-preservation. It really does.
Yes.
I know that when I've talked about it before, I grew up with an alcoholic mother. And this is all stuff I found out in hindsight, right? I didn't know this until I really started doing some work on it. But because of that, I always felt like the relationship I had, the significant female relationship in my lives, whether there was a real girlfriend or a wife or somebody like that, I always struggle with those relationships because in the back of my mind, just like you said, I always felt like that relationship was going to turn bad on me because I had this poor connection to my mother because she was a very active alcoholic during my formative years. And even though as an adult, I sort of understood that, I forgived her, all those things were fine. Deep down inside, I had this fear, right? And it's the same thing, like you're saying, like people aren't going to like me. I always felt like people were going to screw me over. Like I was going to be left alone and fending for myself, which is the way I grew up, and all of those things. So those were very, very big things that I had to work really hard to overcome. And I can still get nervous about that same feeling today. Like that'll still creep in a little bit. Today I know that's not real. I don't have to worry about it. I'm in a very good relationship with a very good partner. So when I feel like that, I do know
you married up.
Yeah,
She's quality.
She is. And somehow, I don't know. But, I know that that's not true, but I still feel that way at times. And I just know that I don't have to react to that feeling, right? I don't have to act on it. I don't have to act out on it. But those are some of the things that we all struggle with.
One of the guys that are Joe and Charlie said a couple weeks ago that one of the reasons I'm afraid to call people or I don't come talk to you is you won't want to talk to me. And it boggled my mind. Because this is somebody whose sobriety I have a lot of respect for, somebody who overcame tremendous personal stuff in sobriety and still never picked up a drink. And every time this person has something to say, it's always good. It's somebody who, if I call them, they won't say much, but what they have to say back is not what I expect, but it's what I need to hear. And then you hear somebody you have such respect for saying, yeah, nobody likes me. I'm like, wow, it's not just me. It makes me realize, like, that is so crazy to hear. Do I sound like that?
I mean, and that's what, we're attracted to those people. The reason why we do a Joe and Charlie with that group of people is because we identify so much with that group of people, right? I mean, we're just good, we're good buds with all those guys. But also, I know exactly who you're talking about. And it's exactly the same reason, right? I mean, I get it. Like, we talk about it all the time. Like, oh, who wants to talk to me? Who wants to talk to me? I've overcome that a lot. Like, it doesn't bother me anymore. But early on, it bothered me a lot. Listen, we talked a little bit about this coming before we came on and started recording. Is we have a friend that we both know, a sponsee of mine happens to be, who's has some health problems going on. And I was over the house to visit him today and to give him a hand with a couple things. And I said to him, I was helping him get back in the house, and he didn't really want me to. And I said this to you, Matt. I said this to you. I said to him, like, hey, remember how we met? And he said, what do you mean? I said, we met because you asked me for help. And he goes, yeah. I said, well, don't stop asking me for help now, right? And I also said, when you asked me for help, you gave me an opportunity, right? That's what people don't understand. You talk about it a lot. We talk about how we feel to be on the receiving end of that phone call, right?
Right.
How good it is to think, oh, this person is having a shit day, and they called me, right? They called me for help. So I tried to impress upon.
I'm always surprised.
On my friend, our friend there, like, when you asked me to help you today, and I did this little insignificant task for you, I felt good about it. I felt good that I was able to do that. Like, you're giving me an opportunity to feel good. So understand that when you ask people for help, you're actually giving them an opportunity to do something good.
I tell that at work to people I work with, that when you ask me for help, or when you ask somebody else for help, if you don't know how to do something or if you need a hand and you don't do that, you've taken away the opportunity for somebody else to feel better. And it's easy to forget that. So if you're struggling with asking for help, just think that through. Get past your pride, even if it's the place of, if I didn't do this and I walk into that room of strangers, whoever I ask for help, I might be actually brightening up their day. And in the process, I'm getting better too.
Absolutely.
Well, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go to Apple Podcasts, rate us, give us a review. Every time you go on Apple Podcasts and you leave a review, I see it. I get an email once a week with all the reviews, and we read every single one. And it's your way to help drive what we talk about on the podcast. Go over to Spotify, leave us a rating there. These are things that help people see the show, and it helps us grow. Be part of this conversation. How hard was it for you when you came in to get help or to ask for help? Our website, soberfriendspod.com, and on Instagram at soberfriendspod. Steve, thanks for helping me tonight and doing this show.
Hey, Matt, you're welcome. Again, happy anniversary. Nice job. Go to bed tonight so you make it through the night sober. And we'll see you tomorrow night. All right, Matt.
Absolutely. And we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.